Is the modern day MPC difficult to learn? The answer to that question is maybe? All right, I know that's a lame answer, but throughout this video, I'm gonna try to shed some light on it through my own personal experience. I've been using the modern day MPCs since early 2020 because I got the MPC-1, that was my first one. I am not an old school MPC user, so I don't have that perspective. But over the past 3 years, I've learned quite a bit. I've also made a lot of videos on the MPC platform, so let's get to it. I'd say the first thing that you need to keep in mind if you're considering getting an MPC is it's not just a piece of hardware, it's a workflow. Just like with a modern day DAW, whether it be Logic, Pro Tools, Ableton, MPCs, and any other production beat platform, sampling platforms are essentially workflows to get to an end result of some sort of goal, right? So it's gonna naturally lend itself to types of genres. Like if you're doing strictly acoustic music, I wouldn't recommend picking up an MPC to just record acoustic guitars and vocals and all that. But if you're doing a lot of modern electronic genres, then obviously sampling devices like the MPC fit really well. Consideration number one is workflow. You're not buying a piece of hardware, you're buying a workflow. Yes, you do get a piece of hardware to work with it, and there's also software, and it's a whole ecosystem and stuff that you can do with that, but the first and foremost thing that you should consider when getting into a piece of hardware, especially the MPC, is it's the workflow that you're purchasing. Now, I started with Logic way back early 1999. So my perspective was coming from a DAW when I jumped into the MPC. Actually, prior to that, I was using a lot of Electron boxes, so I did have some experience in the hardware world. But a lot of people think of the MPC as having a full feature set, and in a lot of ways it does. So there's this blurred line of it's a DAW. Oh, it's a DAW in a box. You know, like people start saying, oh, it's just a hardware DAW. You can pick it up and treat it like a DAW. I don't think that's the case because again, it's workflow, and the workflow of the MPC platform is very different from Ableton and Logic Pro. If you're coming from those worlds, you're probably going to be shocked a bit. You're going to be thinking, oh, this is, it's not lined up, or there's no visual that makes sense with how I'm looking at Logic Pro. So I think that's the first problem that a lot of people can have, is if they come from a DAW perspective and expect a DAW because they've heard people say, oh, it's like a DAW in a box, or it's like a hardware DAW. It's just not going to be that experience. It's going to be the MPC workflow. Now, just a quick example, what do I mean by that? Well, this is the main page and you have tracks. If you want a second track, you move over to track 2. So you're not seeing track 1 and track 2 like visually together. You're literally switching between those tracks. You're not seeing any notes or anything from those tracks. If you want to see notes of a particular track, you have to go over the matrix right here to be able to look at stuff. That alone, very different from a DAW experience. The other thing that's different is the track is then associated with the type of program, whether it's plugin, drum program, MIDI program, key group of a sample that gets stretched across like a keyboard. There's a lot of things that a track can be. And once you learn this group of stuff and what they do, it's very straightforward. In fact, a lot of people who know the MPC will say it's not difficult. Well, of course it's not difficult because you already know it. Anything you know already is going to be inherently easy because you know it. Now, depending on how fast you can learn these type of things will be up to you and how fast you can break away old workflow thoughts that you think should happen. If you're completely new to music production, you actually will probably have an easier time picking this up, because as soon as you understand how to load up a drum kit and then start going on the pads, you'll be good to go. You'll be like, oh, well, that's how I do it. So every time I need a sound, boom. Or if I want to sample, learn how to sample, you're good to go. If you're coming from a different platform, you might have the problem of thinking, well, in Logic, this is how I would do it. If you keep thinking in that platform, you're going to have problems with the new platform. And that's if you switch to anything, whether it be like Logic to Ableton, Octatrack, the list goes on. You'll have problems with the transition if you don't let go of the past thought process. So again, coming from a DAW, jumping in MPC, these are some hurdles that you're going to experience. Now, not to say that the MPC platform is perfect, because it's definitely not. Again, you have these like program module type of things, drum, plugin, MIDI, clip launcher, all that stuff. The MPC platform unfortunately gets a little more confusing when it has MIDI and audio tracks. So audio tracks are separate from the MIDI programs or the MIDI tracks. The main separation between those is that the MIDI tracks will always have some sort of MIDI data essentially associated with them. That could either be actual MIDI notes, or they could be notes that trigger samples, whether it be through a MIDI program or a plugin or a sample. Whereas audio will be an actual audio strip. Now, if you're coming from a DAW and you say, well, how do I record a vocalist all the way through a song? You're gonna have to use the audio track. And as soon as you start using the audio track, you're gonna be like, this doesn't feel as congruent with making actual beats. Like I said, the MPC platform is not perfect, and that is one of my biggest gripes, is how the MIDI and audio tracks mix, because they don't feel like they mix very well. Like if you go to track mute right here, it says track, right? So you're assuming all the tracks. Well, there's no audio tracks in the track mute. It's gonna confuse people right there. That being said, again, this is part of the workflow. This is the platform. So the workflow is all MIDI information is on these main tracks where you make your beat. You know, you got like unlimited, almost unlimited tracks essentially. You have plenty of tracks to work with to make your beats. And then you have sequences, which another thing that the MPC platform treats is essentially loop-based type of production. So you start with however many bars for your first sequence. And let's say you make a 4-bar sequence, you know, you craft an idea and it keeps looping. Then you can make a second sequence. Then you craft that, like let's say it's a B section. You make enough sequences and then you can string them together in a song and then print them out into one master sequence. So you could then have, say, a 5-minute track or a 2-minute track or 3-minute track all on one sequence. But essentially the process is you start with these little chunks that you then sequence together in a master sequence, like a song overall sequence that would be your finished beat, essentially. The flip side of that on a DAW is that you'd grab chunks, move them around, and that's how you rearrange something. But once you get into the workflow of the MPC, I find it extremely fast to be able to create. Both myself and my wife, Meems, we basically use the MPC every day. She makes a beat on it every day, and I'll usually come in, I'll maybe do some drums on whatever beat that she makes, and it's an extremely fast process, but it has taken a bit to get to that point. The first year of having the MPC, I picked up on the basics really fast, but then I didn't quite understand the complexity of like program edits and like the details of sample chopping and sample manipulation until about a year later. And mostly because I was doing hardware-based type of stuff. It's an amazing hardware sequencer if you treat it that way, except for the step sequencer, which we'll talk about that in a second here. But I was treating it mainly as a hardware-based sequencer where I'd have a bunch of gear around me, and maybe the drums would come out of the MPC, maybe I'd have a separate drum machine off to the side, but all the instrumentation was being triggered via MIDI from an MPC live like that, and I would record it into Ableton and mix those tracks. Great workflow. I still use that workflow today. As time has gone by and I've gotten more comfortable with the sampling workflow, the MPC has still become my main go-to platform for a sample-based workflow. Like if I have a choice of starting a beat in Ableton or starting a beat in the MPC platform, I actually prefer the MPC platform. It's because the speed of the workflow is very fast. When it comes to finishing tracks though, this is where I prefer to move things off into Ableton. If you're gonna record any type of vocals, you can record them into the audio tracks. Like I said, this is possible. I do not think it's intuitive though. Now you might be a power MPC user watching this video, auditing this information, and I respect that. And if you're the type of person that does record all your vocals, guitars, and everything into a hardware MPC, more power to you. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that by any means. The tools are there, it's totally capable. But I think for most producers, the power of the MPC is the creation of the beat, the creation of the vibe, creation of the sounds, just whipping something up super fast. You know, within 10 minutes, you can have something that feels ready to record to basically. It just needs a few pockets punched in here and there. So for us, we prefer to take the beat out of an MPC and transfer it into a DAW. Ableton Live is our preferred DAW right now. I actually have a video on that, so if you want to check it out, link below on that whole process. But what that allows us to do is treat things like vocal overdubs or vocal passes, you know, comping and all that, easily done in the DAW. If you want to record like a guitar pass all the way through, or maybe synth lines all the way through and all that, much easier to do in a DAW, in my opinion. But again, I'd still prefer to start the beat on basically an MPC at this point, because I feel very familiar with it and I like the workflow. If you take away anything from this video, it's that it's the workflow that you're purchasing. It's not the hardware, it's the workflow. Real quick, if you're enjoying this content, a like and subscribe goes a long way. And if you're considering buying any new music gear, whether it's an MPC, synthesizer, cables, or whatever, consider using our affiliate links with Zounds. Zounds is our go-to choice. We've been using them for years, so thank you very much if you do use our affiliate links. Okay, real quick, I was gonna mention the step editor. So if you're the type of person that's coming from hardware, or you're the type of person that specifically wants to punch in notes via step edit, I don't think the step editor is very good. Like if you come from a Digitact or an Octatrack, that step editor is gonna be way superior in comparison to the MPC. Now what the MPC has is a matrix editor right here, which you can go in and look at what you played and then modify notes that way. And I use that all the time, very powerful. Which actually leads me to like how musically inclined you are as a producer. Because if you are strictly like entering in notes into a grid, then this workflow is probably gonna be a little more cumbersome for you. But if you're the type of person that wants to play everything, like if you play the majority of your stuff via pads or a keyboard, then it's an excellent experience because you can just plug in a MIDI keyboard in the back or any synthesizer or anything like that, and it will be able to talk to it and you can play naturally, and the resolution on the sequencer is extremely high. So you get the nuance of your playing with everything from the pads to keyboards, and it will translate really well. Whereas a lot of hardware sequencers, maybe the resolution isn't quite as fine, so you're gonna miss out on some of that feel. But at the same time, that might be part of the feel that you like on a particular sequencer, is that it does have kind of minimal time or something. Anyways, that's besides the point. Talking about this, if you are musically inclined, like you're gonna play your stuff like keys or pads most of the time, it's gonna work out great. I can vouch. If you're the type of person that wants to go into the step editor, you could get frustrated. All right, to wrap things up, I do wanna say that the MPC platform is complex. There's, you go into the program edit, there's lots of options to change and do things. And there is ways to achieve the same goal with different routes in the platform itself. So it has its peculiarities, not gonna lie. Definitely some strange choices, but if you do learn this workflow and adopt it into like how fast you can make a beat, it's actually pretty freaking awesome. There's a reason why a lot of people use MPCs out there, both old school and new school. But that's the video. Hopefully you got some information on whether or not this could possibly be your next music production platform. I've got more videos on the channel about music production, so definitely check them out if you're interested. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.